Hello and welcome to the first episode of The Spectrum, a very loosely political podcast joined by my host. I'm Darren. We have
Ali, that's me.
Roshan,
Adi.
My name's Issa. We're joined by our teacher, Mr Haswell. Thank you.
Special guest on the spectrum.
welcome on The Spectrum. Just to find, let's start off with get your stance on the spectrum. Pineapple on pizza, is it a yes or a no?
Absolutely no.
Absolutely
No.
I've never tried it.
You know,
I-
it doesn't make sense to me.
I care to disagree, actually.
Hawaiian's a bit okay, I would say.
I like it. I actually like pineapple on pizza. As long as it's not too tangy.
What's
I
the
think it's
flavour?
fine.
What's the flavour?
It's just it's not really a flavour. I wouldn't say it's a flavour. I think it's more of the texture, which is good.
Do you know what? I'm not a fan of when it comes to pizza, stuffed crust. Like, regardless of cheese or tomato, I don't think it works.
It's too artificial.
I think
Yeah.
I think
the
that
cheese especially.
the American influence just like pollutes the traditional pizza.
Yeah, that's
Imperialism.
I hate it.
No, but I do like, with American pizzas, they're a bit more, like, doughy, I guess. The Italian ones are really flat.
Like, have you tried Chicago style pizza?
Yeah.
The deep
that is
dishes.
nice. Like, yeah, I don't know what it's called.
And the sauces as well.
Something?
The sauces as well.
They have the sauce on top of the cheese.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
cheese underneath.
I think the most disappointing pizza I've ever had was Domino's, and I didn't realise I'd gone for barbecue base.
Oh, that's
And to me, it's just not right. It's
I
not right.
tried this one pizza and it was like burger toppings on a pizza, but it's like with like a burger sauce and like
Burger
like
sauce.
Yeah.
Doesn't sound right.
Because were you there when we were in Sicily, right?
Yeah.
The pizza there was good. Like, we just had it one time.
That's
when we went to
because
the
Yeah,
cab,
obviously.
the,
Yeah,
not
the
like
cab,
the
yeah.
restaurant.
Yeah.
I vaguely remember it, but yeah,
It
it
was
wasn't
nice.
I guess another thing is Costco pizza. Massive
Well,
pizza.
I haven't-
No,
I
it's
haven't-
not nice.
I haven't tried that.
I guess it's not halal, so I guess it's not.
No, but
really
just
favorable.
generally, even the margarita one, which is like the one that they cook on spot and they serve you it like fresh. I don't like that, but that might just be me. I kind of
Actually,
grew
just
out.
remembered probably the worst type of food worse than the barbecue base was I barbecued banana on a pizza.
What?
Once.
Actually,
Fruit.
It was, I think this was in Malaysia, I think, and they sort of, it was sort of seen as almost like a dessert. So it was like beyond pineapple, it was like banana and like yogurt.
Okay, so I think what you're talking about is apple balik, which is it has peanuts. So I don't know if it's exactly the same, but they add like peanuts, bananas, and they fry it. Maybe it's not exactly what you're talking about, but I can see like to the Western taste, it's very out there.
That's true. You know, the Western taste is influenced completely by America. And like, if you think about the example of breakfast, whenever we think breakfast, we think pancakes or like sometimes egg. Yeah, obviously.
Egg toast.
But like a lot of it is quite sweet. But if you go to Asia, you'll get like rice and like
I know,
sometimes
like,
curry
like
for breakfast.
The Mediterranean, they have like olives and like
Yeah.
it's like I guess it's just dependent on like the kind of fruit and vegetable your country grows.
It's true.
Oh,
So-
with pizza as well, yeah. Spinach is actually really nice because if you think about it, it's cheese. Like pizza, it's cheese and tomato. So just like whatever they use with pasta, like works perfectly with
it's on a
pizza.
pizza, yeah.
Yeah, spinach is really good.
Really?
And yes, like even spinach pasta, it's like it's
Bang.
next level. Yeah.
The worst pizza I've tasted was in America. It was a massive pizza, but it was maple syrup and fried chicken.
No,
fried
that-
chicken.
that-
was
that's
nice.
nice.
But not maple. What is maple syrup?
Syrup and chicken, like works really well. There's a place in Camden called Bird, and I think they're inspired by like American food, or whatever. And they have like waffles, chicken, and syrup.
Yeah, they have. There's also a place called Duck and Waffle
Yeah.
in central London.
The
And it's-
only problem with the chicken there is it's quite like hard. But other than that, it is actually pretty nice.
I'd stand by chicken and syrup, but the worst part was that it was the next day. It was like
Oh.
early in the morning for breakfast. What my friend did, he heated up in a microwave, and it made the whole room stink so bad.
Like, I still don't get the appeal of having mixing savoury and sweet. To me, it doesn't make sense.
No, surely that makes more sense. Like, you get best of both, isn't it?
What's
Yeah, but at
like
the same
your,
time?
your like go-to food? Because like say for with Mox, like you kind of need fuel food, right?
So like a snack.
Yeah.
I don't know if I had one.
No.
Mine
I just
was-
had Lucozade. That's what I had.
Mine was like Nesquik's, like strawberry milk.
Strawberry milk.
Yeah, that's good. I like cold milk. How
Yeah,
about
cold
Monster?
milk
Do you
is-
think like, well, none of you guys had kind of food to help you get through them, but how do you guys find the revision period for it?
I structured it and still didn't get through it. So
I think it was really tough because this was probably the first like proper set of like exams that we did in a hall. And from a student perspective, it was definitely I'd say it's a shift in how we revised for it because of how many tests we had in a day.
Yeah, because that's not even like what happens with GCSEs.
Because we were giving a timetable, it made it feel more stressful. But especially because on the Monday I had geography, history and economics, which I wanted to revise for.
Not to have a go at Mr Haswell, but I feel like the school aren't very accommodating to kind of like our own bust on these because this whole of Christmas, that holiday's been taken over by mocks, and it's like we're back in school and I don't feel like I've had a break at all.
But I would argue that might be a good thing because other schools they have them in December, like just before they break up.
I know.
Then when's their revision period? Like
it's in between, but then we've got another set of mocks where we probably won't have like a February holidays.
I think this one was especially stressful because we might have thought that maybe this was the end all because Mr. Ryan, our English teacher, was saying that before the holidays it would have been 50-50 of our chances doing exams versus teacher assessed grades, whereas now it seems more likely that we're going to do exams coming up. So this was maybe we thought that these exams would have been the be all end all and therefore revise more and it would have been more stressful.
So are you guys happy that it's looking like exams rather than teacher assessed grades?
Yeah, definitely.
I'd rather have teacher assessed grades, I have to be honest.
Really?
I think obviously it's good to have exams, but the whole thing where it's almost like the American system where it's multiple tests add into your final score rather than just one test where if you have a bad day then it could be bad or it just results in a bad
I feel like with the way the GCSEs work at this moment where now from school to study leave, the majority of our time in lessons will be spent revising, then we obviously have study leave and then the actual space in between the tests, it gives us so much more time to revise and like actually show that the reason we get grades is not because it's like at this moment in time with the mocks, the reason we might do poorly is because we don't know everything, but in like 6 months time when we have a lot more dedicated revision time, like that, I think that's the case for me.
I guess from a teacher's perspective, have you started marking our mocks yet?
Well, some of the teachers are way ahead of me already. Miss McGregor is a beast at marking.
Year 7, she marked all of our papers in a day.
Yeah, so she's storming ahead. But yeah, we started having a look. I haven't actually marked any of yours yet, so I can't comment on that. I can't give any.
Are you actually marking ours? Because some of our teachers were saying they weren't marking their own sets; they were marking.
No, that's true. We're not. So we're splitting it up by questions.
Yeah,
so I'll be marking a few of the questions for everyone. So I'm looking at the bullet point question.
Oh no, that was a bad performance.
Really? I thought that was quite
In Germany.
In Germany, yeah.
So Germany.
Hill of Hitler versus.
Oh no, that one.
The essay question in Cold Wars.
The essay question, that one was hard.
I don't think I wrote enough.
It was on Deton in 1969. It was a whole 22 years before it actually. I mean, not.
So was it causes of?
Yeah, I think it was
The
called
development.
Yeah. So I suppose there's a few things you can.
There's a few things,
yeah.
But there's a time period where I think a lot of things happen after 1970s, isn't it? Like
I'm not the person to answer. I promise you.
What was it? Nixon visits in China. A lot of the SALT 1 was signed in 72.
And then obviously there's the whole fall of the actual Soviet Union in 1991.
Yeah.
So on that note, should we move on to what was our topic?
Kazakhstan.
Yes, because it is slightly related.
Would you like to introduce the actual topic?
Yes. Okay. So this, as of recording right now, it is the 12th of January of 2022, and just on this 10 days ago, on the 2nd of January, there was some increases in the fuel prices in Kazakhstan. So they used to have a cap on how far fuel prices could rise, which they removed around New Year's Day, so the 2nd of January. And since then, there's been loads of violent protests, and it's just sparking a whole kind of. It's been a catalyst for 30 years of tension and the building of tension since the fall of the empire, the Union.
When I was reading about this, one thing I didn't realize is Kazakhstan's actually loaded.
It is.
They're very rich.
Very rich.
But I think the reason why you don't see that is because their previous leader, the one who ruled for 30 years, his name is
Nazarbayev.
Nazarbayev. He's super rich. He's like worth 200 billion or something. So I think because comparatively, the citizens, they earn less than £405 a month.
Yeah, that was like on top of the fuel prices. I think there's just a general unhappiness with wage inequality and stuff.
I think Kazakhstan has like 3% of the global oil reserves, which is like significant and substantial. And considering how the wages of the actual people are so low, the trickling down of wealth isn't really there in that country.
I don't know if you remember the most recent scandal with sort of offshore accounts. I can't actually remember what it's called now, but it wasn't you've got the Panama Papers, and then you had another one more recently. But quite a few of those were Kazakhstan sort of oligarchs who, their money's not in the country; they're extracting the wealth, and as you say, it's not trickling down into the country's economy.
Yeah, and also I didn't see anything on the news, like for example BBC News or any of the major news headlines. I had to actually research it, and only when I see articles. So I was wondering why this stuff isn't like on the news as much compared to, for example, stuff like, I know COVID-19 is like one of our biggest things, but this is also a big thing, and this will be like the bottom of the pile of what our news sources are reporting about. So I was just wondering, why do you think that is?
I generally think it's like not many people care. Like if you think about it, in this country, like the average person, like I doubt they care about what happens in a country. And realistically, the deaths, like there's been deaths that's horrible, but it's not like the deaths are kind of significant, and it's not like it's happening in like the biggest news that you see on like your homepage is anything that happens in this country, anything that happens regarding the USA or sport.
Yeah,
that's true. But it's like if maybe a couple hundred people die in a country really far away, and it's something to do with the government, like I don't think anyone's on the edge of their seat about it. But people are more concerned about if another lockdown's going to get imposed.
That's true. I think people should care about it, because Kazakhstan, it negotiates with the US because of foreign investment. It negotiates with Russia because it has historic alliances with Russia, but it also negotiates with China because it's a main trade route for their products to be shipped through, to travel to maybe the West. So it's actually quite important in the global geopolitical landscape because of, its position helps, but because of its history as well, it's quite a sensitive topic.
And speaking of Kazakhstan's relationship with Russia, I believe that they called in the CSTO.
Yeah, it's like I think it's
security.
The modern version of the Warsaw
KGB.
Pact.
They formed at the end, yeah.
Slightly different countries involved. You've got like Armenia and Tajikistan, and it's slightly different region, but it is quite it definitely parallels with the Warsaw Pact.
How come these? Because I know when reading, Kazakhstan keeps quite a close relationship with Russia. But like, how comes?
Well, it was a former satellite state, and I think you mentioned Nazarbayev earlier. To my understanding, he assumed control after the fall of the Soviet Union, and has been in power only until quite recently.
Yeah, 30 years.
So they've been a rather quite stable. It's been a stable authoritarian regime, still kind of with heavy influence from the Soviet Union. He's sort of ruled with an iron fist, and they've held sort of quite close ties in that time. Interestingly, he's passed on to his successor Tokayev now, and
Tokayev.
And now it's interesting to see, because it seems like
there's friction between those two.
Absolutely, yeah. There's some kind of political sort of and like factional struggle.
I saw that Tokayev recently he removed Nazarbayev from the Security Council, and he's trying to establish his own power.
Yeah.
So I think that's quite.
What kind of economic policies did Nazarbayev kind of like carry out and like enforce? Was he communist or?
I don't think he was communist.
Left leaning.
I don't think he wanted to be the traditional communist, but because he was communist leader after the fall of the Soviet Union, he had to remain somewhat non-capitalist and not use all their resources all for himself.
Well, I mean, it's interesting to note that what his regime ended up in was a kind of a huge power imbalance between the rich oligarchs and then the citizens in Kazakhstan, who, you know, there's a huge wealth disparity, and that sparked, I mean, I think the spike in the gas prices and the oil prices, that was just the catalyst of 30 years of tension, and it's also really quite substantial because whereas you might think it would only affect the West, which is very much involved with the whole gas situation, it's spread all the way east so that the whole country is now in disarray and they're kind of all protesting at the same time. So,
and of course this wasn't even the first time that the Kazakh people actually protested against the rich oligarchs. I believe
10 years ago.
11 years ago there was another strike about oil again, I believe, against the government, and there were many more casualties, or I think 11 casualties, which is quite substantial.
And you've got to think about foreign involvement, because it's coming up again this time with Putin in his statement, you know, claiming foreign involvement, and I think it was also Tokayev also said, terrorist groups that were trained by outside forces, foreign forces, and we also got to consider the UK's involvement, because the event you were talking about, Tony Blair was like quite heavily involved with offering PR advice on how to deal with that. So it's not like we're completely uninvolved.
I believe that the UN is urging for action against this, against
Tokayev.
And in a way, I guess, supporting these protests, but in a very passive way, I guess, because of these international relations.
Well, yeah, you know, the whole summit for the dealing with Ukraine is coming up, so it's gonna trickle down there. There might be a deterioration in relations.
Are you all very grateful now that we've taught you the Cold War, so you can put all these things into its historical context?
And of course, going back to the Cold War, this event even has echoes of, I'd argue, Prague Spring, with the Soviet Union, I guess Russia in the sense, getting involved in these domestic conflicts.
When I was reading about it, is say this is kind of easier for us to picture, but say all our parents were to buy electric cars because electricity had been made cheaper, like maybe subsidized or whatever, and then as soon as everyone gets the cars, they've risen the price of electricity. That's basically what happens. It's not that they've just raised the price of petrol because they've cut subsidies. It's like following everyone moving to the cars that actually use the petrol. No. So that's kind of what's wound them up
in a way to make a lot of money.
I'm not sure about that, but honestly, probably. Do you know how they claim that like terrorists were involved? Do you think it's not a scapegoat, but it's almost to like victimize themselves?
I think it's to direct attention away from, because there's beyond the whole protests with the civilians in the government. Tokayev is, I think, trying to solidify his rule and his regime by outing Nazarbayev and his close allies. And I think this kind of, the whole situation where he's ordered, the police to shoot to kill, I think while that's obviously terrible, it might be like a kind of way of distracting people from seeing what's going on in his own government so that he can achieve his own purposes.
Would you guys... Oh, sorry.
No.
What do you guys think about protests in general? Have you guys ever been to one?
Yes.
I saw Shuaib, but I didn't see you.
Shuaib was there? No, I saw you.
What was this for?
This was for Palestine.
Oh yeah.
At the time, it was really bad. It's still really bad, but
less coverage in the news.
Less coverage, obviously. But
I think we're quite fortunate to be in London, which is, although it is in England, which is obviously not the best place, but the freedom of speech.
It's much better.
Yeah, because I also heard that in Kazakhstan, 10,000 people have already been detained.
Yeah.
And that article was from a few days ago.
And there's no like opposition parties either.
Oh yeah,
I think that's very important
because it kind of reflects what Hitler was doing in that he made a lot of his policies and he solidified his regime by making all of his rules institutionalized. So like the idea of they're not allowed a political system where the parties, it's like certain parties, they can't like go into elections because they haven't been approved, or that there can't be protests unless you get the permission from your local government, which just it kind of reduces the amount of power the people have over their own country.
And about that, I believe that they actually cut internet access during this. There was a 5-day outage, which really...
No, they've still got the outage until I think the 23rd maybe. Oh, not 20. I'm not sure, but it's scheduled to be removed. But they still got the outage.
And also a small topic I wanted to do at the end. I know it's slightly shifting away from Kazakhstan, but to do with more Russian influence. I recently saw the Salisbury poisoning documentary.
Yeah. Is it good?
It's really good, and it was based on the Salisbury poisonings of a former Russian spy and his daughter by 2 Russians.
Was that at his door?
It was
poisoned Sainsbury's or something.
Do you want to explain the context? Because
so
I'm a bit clueless.
they used the Novichok nerve agent, which is highly toxic and can cause mass damage and destruction if it spread. It's like radioactive, so if it's touched, it can just spread throughout.
It's lethal, pretty much.
Yeah. Did you watch was it the documentary or the BBC drama?
The documentary.
Oh, so I've seen the drama, and they really it gives you a sense of how catastrophic it could have been for this tiny little sort of town in Cambridge. But it was possible if it got into the water supplies. it could have been really, really serious, and it was close to doing so. So it was a quite significant event, but quite lucky actually that it didn't escalate more than it did.
I think it was really serious that due to the Russian influence, it killed one one lady.
Mm.
So I think they launched a criminal investigation against Russia, but I'm not sure where that's got to.
Leading on from that, do you wanna discuss this question for the last 5 or so minutes? Do you think that there'll ever be a war because of deterioration in relations?
No.
If it gets that far?
No.
I wouldn't see
I
that.
don't think so.
No, I feel countries get away with so much now, and it's a lot of people are anti-war, rightly so. Why would you want to involve your country with, realistically, the only time there would ever be war is in self-defense, but no country is gonna attack another country. You might attack individuals, and in the case of the Salisbury poisonings, Russia have gone, potentially, I'm not sure, but have gone to get people of their own, I guess, or people they're involved with. There's no country really has the intention of attacking a country and killing its people, as we've previously seen. So there's no reason.
What do you think about Poland?
Poland.
Not Poland, sorry, Ukraine.
Ukraine.
That's what I'm saying.
I think there'll always be indirect conflict
Yeah.
of opinions, because the USA won't want a direct war against Russia, but they'll always be on the opposing side, and they'll fund other people which fight their wars for them.
So proxy.
Yeah.
I think any conflict which happens will always be secret and not revealed to the public. For example, with the Salisbury poisonings, if it wasn't exposed, then none of us would have heard about it. It would have all been hushed down, and I think stuff like the Salisbury poisonings happen more than we think, and we just don't know about it. I think if there ever was conflict, there could be conflict right now, and it's just all secret. Not necessarily invading other countries and killing all its people, but taking out specific people of high importance. I think that occurs.
Well, I think ever since they annexed Crimea in 2014, there has been conflict, particularly in this sort of east of Ukraine, in areas where they're kind of surrounded by Russia, because they've got Crimea in the south and then obviously Russian land in the east, and so there's been conflict in those regions since 2014. It's not widely reported. Russia say they're not at war. Ukrainians consider themselves at war with Russia at this stage. And it's you got to feel really sorry for just the ordinary citizen in Ukraine, because they're caught between NATO on the one side and Russia on the other, and they've got a lot of cultural and political ties with Russia, and have done for many years, of course. But I think the more Russia push, the more many will lean towards joining NATO. But it's almost a political impossibility at this stage.
I think if they join NATO, Russia will have to push forward. So if they try to discuss negotiations with NATO, I think Russia will just push forward more, trying to stop that deal. Because if Ukraine on the border as a NATO country will be with Russia, against Russia, that will just cause mass conflict.
I think conflict is unavoidable, but whether we know about it or are heavily involved, war is probably never going to happen.
I think the scale of war and the actual development of technology since World War II, it's not going to be fighting with people, it's going to be fighting with nuclear arms that are able of even since the Cold War, they were developing arms that were, the ICBMs that were capable of destroying whole cities. At this point, it's whole countries, it's whole continents. And I reckon, going back to the Cold War once again, the idea of mutually assured destruction is definitely enact and keeping people away from war.
Or potentially even cyber warfare. But it's as an individual, I've never really been worried about war, because my standard of living is waking up in a house, which I'm grateful for, going to school, working, going back, I'm going back home. And it's even if
there's nothing to do with.
Yeah, it's gotten literally in no way I can't. Yeah, exactly. I can't imagine it being affected by anything really, any kind of Eastern European war. And imagine in a situation where there were no other countries, even Ireland, Wales, it's just England. I don't feel it wouldn't be fair enough. We might not have imports, but our lives wouldn't be significantly different.
Yeah, I would agree.
Yeah, I think also going back to what Darren said, I think for example nuclear war. I think nuclear war is mutually assured destruction. I think that's one of the main things, and maybe even the only thing, which is stopping us from actually having a war.
Well, that has led to the ton, our history questions.
Yes.
Everything comes back to history.
Yes, because no country can bomb another country, for example, with a hydrogen bomb or a nuclear bomb, and then expect nothing else to happen. It just isn't possible. And then every country, or every major country, has all this nuclear warfare, has everything. And I think, for example, stuff like cyber warfare is more of the warfare that we'll see in the future.
And with that,
on that note, do you guys want to wrap it up?
Lovely first episode.
2 minutes left.
Thank you very much.
That's episode 2 of The Spectrum.
I'll have to come